morning. God has truly, truly, truly been good to all of us. Um, so this morning, I want to read from the book of Nehemiah 2 through 6. Don't ask me how I get Nehemiah. I just was browsing and ended up in in the book of Nehemiah last night. So Nehemiah 2, verse 2 through 2 through 6, sorry, says, So the king asked me, Why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Then I was terrified, but I replied, Long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. The king asked, Well, how can I help you? With a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied, if it pleases the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked, How long will you be gone? When will you return? After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. And today, I'm just grateful for every single thing that God has blessed me with, from my health and my strength and my wife, my children. Um, First, I wait for my kids right now. So the persons who are watching my kids, our village, grateful for friends and family and each and every one of you. God is truly great. Just just standing at at the view that I'm looking at right now of some mountains. um, I'm just literally in awe. Waking up this morning and just looking at the glory of God. You know what I mean? Like the great artist. It's this particular part of the scripture though, in this book actually, the story of Nehemiah and King Artaxerxes was an interesting story. He he wanted to go back home, right? And I only can imagine his anxiety, because he basically asking the king, and I can imagine how it was in those days, but he basically asking the king that, man, I leaving work, like I want to go home and I want to leave the job for you, and he was well respected in that court. And he basically telling him like, hey man, I need to leave. You can imagine someone saying they need to leave work to go rebuild the city. They're saying like he taking a sick day. You know what I mean? Like you almost giving up one of your best employees. But the reason why I saved this particular part of scripture, and you guys should know me by now, is because trigger words, right? So he said to the king asks, how can I help you? Right? When he basically told the king what happened to his city, the walls were knocked down, everything was destroyed. And he asked the king, the king asked him, how can I help you? But the easiest thing that he could have done was spit out to the king that because he said, how can I help you? The king said, how can I, me, the king, help you? Right? But before he even responded to the king, he says it right there in the scripture. He says, with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied. And to me, that was so powerful because the king already asked him like what he wanted. You understand? And the easiest thing in the world would have been for him to say, I want you to do this or I want you to do that. But what Nehemiah did was that he consulted with God before he made a big decision. And that's really what I wanted to say and talk about this morning, how important it is for us to speak to God before we make big decisions in our life. Because sometimes the answer to these questions is look so simple in the front of us, because it seems as though that it's something that or something that is within our power to know won't come behind it, you know? Or it seems as though like it's so easy that we don't need to get God involved in it, But in everything that we do, we have to actively get God involved in it, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, And it's something so simple, like it wasn't that he said that, he went to the altar and, he slaughtered 40 cows and He didn't have to go and build a temple to the Lord. And, you know, he said, with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied. So you could imagine how short that must have been. You see, because it didn't say like, he went and had a prayer and then came back. He said, with a prayer to the God of heaven, I replied. That means that that moment of prayer was right then and there. Right then and there. Like I literally, when I was reading that, I visualized him just simply closing his eyes and saying, God, you know where my heart is. You know, make sure that whatever it is I ask for, I get. Or make sure that whatever it is that you give him to do for me is your will and not his or my own. And I just want us to go throughout our week with that same thought in our heart, with that same mentality, with that same sort of push and drive and remembrance that at the end of the day, let's involve God in everything we do, in the big decisions and small decisions, and we don't have to go out there and we don't have to drop a big prayer, we don't have to go and even sometimes let people know that we are praying, you know. Sometimes this prayer is just simple, a prayer is just speaking to God. That's all that it is. It's a conversation. Sometimes it's you just whispering to him, God, let me make sure that it's the right decision. God, help me to make the right decision. God, I need you here. I need you involved in this, what's going on right now. So as we go throughout this week, I pray, and my prayer is that all of us continue to ask God to be a part of every decision we make in our lives. Everything from the big ones to the small ones. If I go in the grocery store now, I asking God to make sure that I buy fresh fruit. That's so deep. I trying to get God involved in my life. So thank you guys for the opportunity to speak. I pass the microphone on to my brother Ontario.